Okay, first, before we jump into the prototype, a little bit about the data model, how data is stored, what we call things in History Matrix, how we organize things. This is going to be crucial, and it's this idea that I'm demonstrating here, which the prototype as an early and somewhat rough attempt to implement. Um, so let's just get down to it. There are two basic kinds of records in History Matrix. The first kind are elements, and these are basically the irreducible components of history. There's various different types, people, succinct events, achievements, shapes, paths, but the thing these all have in common is they are succinct, named components of history that within History Matrix we're not going to go any lower than. These are the basic irreducible components, and the attributes that each one of these have, at a minimum, are going to give them a place in the framework of History Matrix. That framework is made up of time and space, or time and geography. And so at minimum, we're going to have a start date and end date, and we're going to have a latitude and longitude associated with those dates. Um, uh, we can also have an entire schedule of latitude and longitude associated with different dates that give these elements different places at different times, so we can see their dynamic nature as we scroll through time. Elements are connected, or they have relationships with each other. That's the other kind of record that we have in History Matrix, are relationships. Relationships are actually records. These are not implied. These are actual records in History Matrix, but they depend on the existence of elements for their own existence because they're going to connect each. Each relationship is going to have a beginning point and an end point, which is going to connect two elements. These really can be of any kind. We have biological relationships. We can have a relationship between a person and a book that is author, a composer, a victor. We're talking about a battle. These are any kind of relationship that can be construed between two elements. So this is the base data. This is everything else in History Matrix is going to be implied from the records that make up the elements and the relationships. But all we've succeeded now in doing is having a whole lot of low-level data. We don't conceive of history, however, as human beings at the element level. We don't go and memorize lists of people's names and where they were born and when they lived and died. We recognize history at the level of the narrative. Just like we engage language at the level of the word, not the letter, we engage history at the level of the narrative. And so the narrative is going to be the primary searchable object in History Matrix. Now, all of these elements and these relationships can also be searched directly, but narratives are going to be the main handle we get on the data to pull up meaningful combinations of elements and relationships. And so a narrative is just that. It is a list of elements. It is a collection of elements. And so, for example, we can never have a element called World War II. What we'd have is a narrative or collection called World War II, which would include all of the people, all of the battles, all of the elements that make up that battle. When we call World War II, it's going to call all those elements to the screen, and we're going to see them on display in their time and space. As we move through time, we're going to see things transpire, only having to do with World War II. So I call narratives a hierarchical level of cohesion directly consumable by the human brain. This is where History Matrix begins to become powerful, because unlike other wiki-driven tools, say Wikipedia, we need not have a single World War II entry. Competing entries can be made, differentiated by the names of their creators, their authors, and so we can actually compare different versions of history. We can also compare narratives with other narratives that are only partially overlapping. And in fact, narratives themselves can be combined to make up broader narratives. And so you can make narratives by adding elements to a narrative, or we can add entire narratives in themselves to broader narratives. What's fascinating about this, as you'll see when we get into History Matrix, is this implies narrative hierarchies. All of a sudden, because we have elements that are grouped into narratives, which are grouped into broader narratives, because we are imposing this hierarchy on the data, but having a natural hierarchy and allowing alternative hierarchies, we can see the relationships between narratives and see how they branch out from one another. So, for example, we could have a narrative called Christianity, which could include all the elements and relationships within history matrix having to do with Christianity. But then that narrative could itself break out into additional narratives of the different branches of Christianity, maybe Catholicism, which then breaks into the various branches of Protestantism, which breaks out further as time passes into the very different narrow sects of Christianity. And this is going to be something we can see, and it's not going to be a single top-down hierarchy, but it's going to be a hierarchy implied by all the different collections that people make and the overlap between those collections. We'll be able to see it explicitly and navigate it. Additionally, we can use narratives to look at the combinations of base elements. And so now we can pick two people, no matter how closely related or how apparently disparate, and we can see by the stories they participate in and the overlapping between those stories, various relationships between those elements that there are no explicit relationships for. Additionally, relationships that go between any two elements can be linked together to create paths between elements that are farther apart than a single relationship. So that's an overview of how data is stored and viewed in History Matrix. Let's go to the prototype now.